Hopefully you can all hear me okay, and you can see the title slide on your screen. And I want to also first thank Carolyn and Sean for the opportunity to work with them on this really cool project. It isn't always that you get an opportunity to float an entire main stem of a river looking for invasive species and other good things, as you'll see as we get into it. So this was a project funded by the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. The primary goals are shown here: to survey invasive species from the St. Joe River going headwaters to mouth, to use that information to help prioritize treatment, and then also inform and to support conducting treatment based on the findings of the project. We also set about collecting data to help assess and protect the habitats within the watershed along the main stem. So a lot of good riparian forest, wetland habitats, and an interest, of course, in water quality and biodiversity. And then also ultimately the goal to add the invasive species observations to the MISN database, and that'll become a little bit more clear as we go forward as well. So the approach that we took was to conduct the daily surveys, again, headwaters to mouth. The total river mile distance is just over 200 miles. We did this between August 19th, 2020 and August 17th of last summer, 2021. 43 individual survey days during that period of time. 2 people were involved each day, mostly each in separate kayaks. 2 vehicles were used to do the shuttling that's required. So, you know, driving to the stretch of river for that day, parking a vehicle at the takeout spot, driving the other vehicle to the put-in spot, and doing the shuttling that way. And at the beginning, the MISN phone app was used predominantly, but we also from the start brought GPS-enabled action cameras. This is, you can read GoPro camera into that. We also had a Garmin camera, but we ended up doing the majority of the survey with 2 GoPro cameras that collected GPS information at very high frequency and sufficient accuracy to do what we had set out to do. And the objective there was to record verbal observations. So we turned the GoPro camera on and engage it in a one-sided conversation for the throughout the duration of the float for that particular day, and then also record the location information. But one of the things that allowed us to do was to not only map invasive species observations, and we're looking at both aquatic and terrestrial species along the shoreline, but also record locations of a variety of other things that could be related to invasive species or would describe the environment around the invasive species. So, you know, different kinds of disturbance, bank erosion that was observed, riparian buffer, or lack thereof. But we also took the opportunity to record a range of things that we thought would be interesting, including fish and wildlife observations and things, again, to try to get, as we heard in the initial talk, to try to get a picture of the system as a whole. So this slide attempts to give you a little more detail about what that looked like, at least in terms of kind of the graphics with the information that was collected by the GoPro cameras. So what you're seeing here is an example from one of the days at the beginning on June 15th, 2021, our put-in spot, and then the blue lines that you can see are the the tracks of the GPS track recorded by the GoPro cameras, again, one on each kayak. So this also gives you the picture that and what we did typically was hug the shoreline, each shoreline of the system as we went from headwaters to mouth. So what we were then also able to do is, as we recorded the audio or onto the audio that the video cameras were taking, we would note different kinds of observations. And so what you see depicted here in the red markers were our locations of individual spoken observations that were recorded by the camera. So we were able to extract the location information and then essentially transcribed the verbal comments that we made to get those point locations. So that's depicted in the red markers. A little bit more on that score. So the key step obviously is going from being in the field with a GoPro camera to actually getting actionable information. And an Excel spreadsheet was kind of the key next step in that. So what you're looking at now is, 3 rows of a spreadsheet that's well over 5,000 rows, which gives some information about where we were, the date we were out there, the video file name, and then the observation on the far right. Again, that's an observation that basically we did a hand transcribing process to get the information in there. One of the tools, though, that we found, it sounds like an arduous task. It's, in some ways it is, but one of the tools that we used to that really helped speed the process was the highlight command, and we could use that both as a voice command and through a phone app connected to the GoPro camera to essentially mark the points of all of the observations. Then we used commercial software to extract all of those points and the latitude, longitude, and time reference for that, so that we could go straight to those particular points and listen to the video and transcribe the observation. So in doing that, we again ended up with a very large spreadsheet. What we have is a very large spreadsheet of observations that include terrestrial and aquatic invasive species and lots of other characteristics of the river that we encountered. This page shows you the species that we observed, the invasive species that we observed, some of the key terrestrial and aquatic species, and then also the rusty crayfish. We didn't see any red swamp crayfish. But the other important observation is that we didn't observe any Michigan watch list species on this trip. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. One of the key areas of interest here is, what do you do with all that information? Obviously, education and outreach is an important part, but even with the amount of information that we have, how do we sift through it? How do we make sense of it? And so what we've been doing is making use of Google Earth and Google My Maps, because we have the latitude longitudes for all of the kinds of observations that we've made. These interactive tools are quite powerful and are free and allow us to get this information from spreadsheet onto a map. And obviously maps, you can bring a lot of different sorts of layers into those maps. And in addition, what we've done is developed another map where we have links to, or where we've where you can put YouTube or links to YouTube videos that help people connect the geospatial location information on the map to what we actually saw and said in the river. Now this also takes some time because what the links provide is a video clip, anywhere between 30 seconds to a couple of minutes, depending on the type of the observation. But the map that we've put together so far that's depicted here has about 28 different video clips that are mapped, along with all kinds of other observations that we made along the way. And you can see the list of the kinds of things we looked at and made comments about on the left-hand side. And I've mentioned these before. One of the other things I'll mention is that there is a layer on these maps which provides just a very simple location accuracy check, kind of a gut level check. And that layer basically is the mapping of our observations about bridges or boat launches or other kind of, concrete structures that are really easy to spot in a satellite view, a Google Earth or Google Maps satellite view. So what we do with that is just, click individual spots in that layer. And if it's talking about a bridge being just upstream of such and such a bridge, that's where the dot should show up on the map. So we've evaluated as we went the accuracy of the cameras and found it to be quite good, really from start to finish, with a few exceptions. A little bit about the challenges that, or the value in the challenges of river surveys. They're important for a variety of reasons. A few are captured here. It's an easy way to view habitats that you can't get to by roads or a hiking trail. This is where land and water meet, and we know there's a lot of important habitat in this space, a lot of diverse habitat, but also a lot of disturbance that can happen naturally, as well as through human development, shoreline practices, etc. So being able to take a close look at all of that, those kinds of features is important, and invasives can be transported via river currents, wind, characteristics that, especially around larger rivers, can be really important. And some of the
minutes, Doug.
Got it. Some of the challenges in doing surveys this way: boating safety is important. Proper care to avoid spreading invasives, even though we're on the same water body. Still, there's an upstream, downstream. Obviously, an importance in cleaning the kayaks. And invasive species can be overlooked for a variety of reasons. Sometimes the river is moving faster than you can really watch the shoreline very carefully. Sometimes the water is deeper. We encountered that where it's hard to see aquatic invasives when there's a lot of water flowing through the system. And in some cases, also invasives can be obscured by other things. There's a lot of grapevine out there, so that obscures some terrestrial species, and algae growth is a big deal on the St. Joe River. We made a bunch of observations about that as well. But that can make it difficult to identify the aquatic plants you're looking at. Using the action camera, hands-free, we were able to capture a wide range of information, both in audio and video. It's time efficient in the field because we could, put the boats in the water and just move on down the river while we recorded the observations, just with our voices, essentially. And you can see some of the other things here. There's a lot of content clearly that we have now that I think can be useful for education and outreach. Challenges, there's time required to transcribe the observations. You need time to manage files and data. You have to be careful not to lose files because there's a potential for important loss of data if that happens. And background noise can sometimes be a problem in the voice command. The next steps for this particular project, we're in the process of summarizing all the data that we have. One of the objectives we have is to consolidate a lot of our observations into more efficient or into spreadsheets with the most important observations that we can provide directly to MISN, so that we're not adding information to MISN one record at a time. We plan to return for some field visits in 2022 to look at repeatability, so places that we've been before, just to recheck them. We're always looking for new uses of the survey results that we have, and there are a lot of tributaries in the system as well that are obviously an important part of the invasive species picture. So my final slide, thanks to the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, support from the Friends of the St. Joseph River, thanks again to the St. Joe County Conservation District and SMIST. You can see that several folks were involved in the survey work, and the company that I am, the practice that I've started, we provided some match support as well. And that's it.
We just want to open up the way any of our survey material we want to get to other SISMAs or the public so that they can use this information for whatever they want. There's so many more grants that could be written from this information, and we were super surprised that it was not as expensive as you think. The materials were about $8,000, and then we had a lot of things that we put together. So come out and float with us one day or just look at our online stuff. It's pretty amazing.